music while shaving. Cody is going to be. Tell me.
I don't remember.
Tell me your first memory.
Hey there, you on the table. I wonder if you'd mind taking a brief survey. 5 questions. To start out, who are you?
Hello, Lumen official employees / Mudbeards. I'm excited to bring another theory video today, mainly going over what could be down the exports hall. But before we get too far into it, I want to start this video off similar to my most recent Severance theory video and give some major props yet again to Jessica Lee Gagné. Again, I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Either way, I want to again reiterate how talented she is. I go further into detail about what she put into this sort of episode, but I highly recommend you do some research yourself. We will start today's theory video with one character who is still a mystery as far as we know, and that is Miss Huang. Miss Huang is a character who was introduced in season 2 and immediately had a lot of us questioning what was going to be happening with her. See, in one of the cast interviews, they had revealed that some of the characters would have trouble understanding if she was necessarily a friend or a foe, and as we've progressed through the season, we've seen just exactly that. It's hard to pinpoint exactly whose side she's on, but I'm voting that she's definitely going to be against our characters and for sure going to be an antagonist in some way. But one key thing we have about her origin story is that she used to be what's known as a Crossinggaurd. Now inherently you would assume this means helping maybe some other people of her grade or younger students walk across the street in the outie world. But what if it was something a little bit darker? But what if Crossinggaurds are actually the names used for the doppelgangers we've been seeing in the series so far? More specifically, the doppelgangers we see in episode 7 season 2. Why do I say this? Well, off the bat, we could see that Helly's doppelganger looks a lot like Miss Huang. They also use interesting terminology in that scene, like are the severing barriers holding? If you watch that scene slowly and look at Mark's doppelganger, you can see that he's keeping an eye on Mark's tempers as Mark is finishing the files. Is it possible that these people are the middlemen or crossing guards to Lumen's grand goal or whatever the MDR process is? Is it also possible that Miss Huang had seemingly graduated from being a crossing guard? Before we move on from that scene, that jumpsuit guy was pretty weird. Does anybody have any theories on him? Because I'm genuinely interested in what you guys might think. So far, my only thoughts are he could represent one of the tempers. As of which one, I'm mostly thinking Dread, but that's just because it sounds the coolest. What we also notice in this scene is that Mark's doppelganger is keeping an eye on Gemma as she makes her way through the rooms. The rooms, which also share a same name as the files that the MDR team are completing. My original theory was that the MDR team's numbers that they were implementing were actually manipulating or adjusting these rooms in a certain way, so that when Gemma was experiencing these rooms, she would experience whatever they wanted her to experience subliminally. But as I was strolling through Twitter, I saw a theory that I think really put the hammer on the nail here. This comes from a user named Chris. To quote, they basically say, "This feels like they're trying to prep Severance for the mass market, testing it out in everyday but painful scenarios until she can keep her tempers balanced doing each one." I really like this theory, because we already know Lumen's grand goal is to make everyone one of Kier's children. And if they can ensure that the severing process is 100% guaranteed to work through any sort of situation, it's more likely to be put on a mass public scale. Examples we see of these situations would be the dentist office, would be the Christmas situation and writing a bunch of cards, which maybe could be for a severed person doing a job. We also see someone in an airplane going through seemingly a simulated crash. But we all know Lumen's grand goals aren't just to make a well-working product for everyone to use. See, they worship a figure named Kier Egan. Kier and his family seem to have been the crux for the entire Lumen operation as a whole. A lot of theorists, including myself, believe that Lumen is trying to resurrect Kier in some way. With this context in mind, I have a theory that I think is pretty close, but it needed this context before I got into the next part. But this theory could potentially show us how the rest of the narrative could play out. An aspect we've seen of the show so far is a stark difference between the different members of Lumen as a whole. We see the Egan family. I'm believing Helena is the only one we've seen so far, but there's a reason to believe that the guy representing Frolic and some other characters are also Egans. Has anyone noticed that the only people that are truly and wholeheartedly devout to Kier seem to be the administrative side of Lumen, as in Miss Cobell, as in Milkchick, whereas all we get from the Egans is a solemn praise Kier once in a while, or a name drop. We also know that the Egan family didn't have a big idea or clue what was going on with Cobell and how she was running things on the severed floor. In one of my other theory videos, I had touched on the idea that the administrative side would eventually come to conflict with the Egans and their family specifically. What if the Egans, while being directly related to Kier, are primarily after wealth and growth of the company, versus the employees, those who were indoctrinated, are full believers in resurrecting Kier? Not to say this would cause a disagreement necessarily, but it would explain why they're so at odds with each other when it comes to Helena and Cobell's conversations, despite the fact that a lot of them are accomplishing what each other needs. If there is a conflict, it might be better for the Egan family to win, because despite being a little bit corrupt, the mass production of severing chips isn't necessarily a bad thing compared to what the administrative side might want. And my theory on that is they truly do want the resurrection of Kier. How do they resurrect Kier? Well, I'm not a mathematician scientist guy, but I will say this. We've seen a lot of implementation throughout the show of psychology and subliminal messaging / subconscious of the human mind. While I don't know if there's any studies or how the math could necessarily work, what if, by the end, if severing is produced on a massive scale, the alternate sides of people who are severed, maybe parts of their days will be completely cut out that they don't remember but won't have to worry about, are being used to resurrect Kier, making everyone Kier's children and having a piece of him within everyone. Ultimately, this could create science fiction's first well-established pseudo-hive mind in a somewhat futuristic sci-fi setting in a TV show. I know that's a big title, but either way, it's a pretty interesting feat to see the development of this process if Lumen's grand goal is a huge hive mind / resurrection of Kier. And the term hive mind kind of deters me from the theory a little bit, so I'd rather use the term control. We see throughout the series that a lot of the people at Lumen believe very much in control, whether it be through balancing your tempers, whether it be through making sure you're using appropriate wordings or appropriate dress code. We even see in Kier's origin story that he had to get rid of the things that he deemed unnecessary, as in the 4 tempers, as in his brother Dieter, as in he was the first severed. You can check out that in one of my other videos. And if that's the case, maybe Miss Casey is an example of one of those people, one of those shells of a human being. And if it's all about control, then it's interesting the juxtaposition between who I would call the heroes of the story, and that's the people of the public. See, if Lumen and the antagonists of the story represent control, then notice how everybody that's advocating against them represents some sort of grounded chaos. You have the kids on the street reaching out to anybody that comes across them, and they're ready to cause conflict and start conflict. They're not going to shy away when Mark comes up and starts advocating for Severance. Then you have fuck you Lumen. Those people are the definition of chaos. We see even in that environment, when Mark started to warm up, the only reason he left was because a fight broke out and Petey's daughter was not happy to see him. Then you have Rogabi, who I'd argue at this point is the absolute agent of chaos. I did see a theory somewhere that Rogabi could potentially not even be working or have worked for Lumen, but just knows a lot about the process for some particular reason, or could even be working for the Home Mind Collective, which we have not seen for a while. Either way, if Lumen represents control, then it's up to the people to bring on some chaos. Anyways, this show just keeps getting better and better. I'm really enjoying it so far. Hopefully you guys are too. I do still have questions about Miss Wong. I do still have questions about Miss Cobell, and I still have questions about the jumpsuit guy, who I do believe is a temper of some kind. Either way, this episode felt like what could have been a penultimate episode, but it's nice to see that we still get quite a few more to go through. So, like I normally do, I'll be live streaming it next week. Hopefully y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one out there, and keep theorizing.